gade gade para sam gade Bodhisattva Teada gade para sam gade Bodhisattva Teada gade para sam gade Bodhisattva Nidu Jiva Zonu Gunshi Nije Denze Kanyen Dang Lola Pemba Chana Namshi Nije Jikden Duru Zeba Tanda Yada Dembe Dono Nampa Kunde Nason Desung Nidu Junju Sempe Soje Sanje Jini Yumdala Chansen Kange Tenjen Jawa Yung Kakwa Meba Jemeba Chaba Meba Dang Meba Wang Meba Drum Tade Demi Tenjimi Treba Nishi Shetenba Zobe Sanje Mana
Дорогие друзья, Его Святейшество Далай Лама принял решение, что он хочет слышать вас и видеть, когда вы задаете свои вопросы. Поэтому сегодня будет 2 сессии вопросов и ответов. Одна прямо сейчас. Я прошу волонтеров в крайних проходах слева и справа, пожалуйста, встаньте здесь и помогите нам организовать эту сессию. Люди, желающие задать вопросы, пожалуйста, по боковым проходам подходите к волонтерам, выстроитесь в очередь. Вы сможете задать свой вопрос в микрофон. Большая просьба задавать вопрос без вступления, чтобы это был именно вопрос, четкий, желательно короткий и понятный. Большое вам спасибо. Пожалуйста, в боковых проходах вставайте в очередь и в порядке общей очереди подходите к микрофону.
Sanje Shada Soje Shanam La, Chanjo Bado Tane Yazushi, Tage Shindo Jive Sona. Chola Benje Sanje Rojo, Sanje Shada Soje Shanam La, Chanjo Bado Tane Yazushi. Tage Shindo Jive Sonam Jin, Chola Benje Sanje Rojo, Sanje Shada Soje Shanam La, Chanjo Bado Tane Yazushi. Tage Shindo Jive Sonam Jin, Chola Benje Sanje Rojo. Kangidu Zinja Ne Dawadu Jabambe Jada Dambe Jene Denze Kodam Dala Chansen Lo.
Buddha in order to benefit all acceptance.
Ta Kasinge Lawana Shiri, Sanje Vichu Sadi, Samdan and Roga Jimmy Indusane, Chi Granza de Chi Chenji Chebe Godundi, Kanza Sam Nalogy, Kwasa Chaya Jida. So the purpose of giving this kind of discourse is to gain understanding of the Dharma and to have knowledge, and also that in turn helps us to transform our mind. So we must consider this kind of discourse like having a class. And listening to a lecture, and I consider myself as here to explain to you what the Dharma is, and you should listen to the lecture. And I'm not here to give you blessings, and therefore you must try to understand the teaching, and then try to apply the teaching within yourself to make transformation within yourself. And therefore, I do not just give teachings, but I also engage in question and answer sessions. I also, so in the morning, we'll have a question and answer session, and then in during the second session, we'll also have a question and answer session. As the lady already announced, you should make your point clearly and don't talk long. So just answer the main question that you have, and so you have the right to answer and to ask any questions, and also I have the right to answer whether I give answer or not.
И поэтому та дхармическая связь, которую мы сегодня и вчера закладываем вместе с вами, необходима для того, чтобы вы глубже могли постичь учение Будды, чтобы вы узнали что-то новое об учении Будды, и она обязательно необходима для того, чтобы обрести ум и спокойствие ума. И поэтому та дхармическая связь, которую мы с вами закладываем, то есть во время наших с вами встреч, вам необходимо думать о том, что наши встречи подобны классу, в котором мы изучаем дхарму, классу, в котором мы изучаем учение Будды. И поэтому вам необходимо думать, что я даю вам объяснение учения, и это не является каким-то благословением от какого-то великого ламы. То есть, получая такое учение, вам нет необходимости думать, что вы обретаете какое-то благословение от великого учителя. Вам необходимо думать, что я даю вам введение в учение Будды. Введение в учение Будды, посредством которого вы можете трансформировать свой ум, можете трансформировать свое сознание. И я постоянно совершаю, то есть я постоянно это делаю, то есть мы всегда проводим сессию вопросов и ответов. И я думаю, что в этот раз было бы тоже хорошо провести такую сессию. Поэтому в начале первой сессии будет такой отрезок, когда вы можете задать свои вопросы, и в 2 часа во время второй сессии у вас тоже будет такая возможность задать свои вопросы. Поэтому я хотел бы попросить, чтобы ваши вопросы были по сути, чтобы они краткие, так, чтобы их не пришлось объяснять. И у каждого из вас есть право задать свой вопрос. И в то же время у меня есть право ответить или не ответить на этот вопрос.
I have no way to understand.
Хотелось бы спросить его святейшества такой вопрос. Слышал ли он когда-нибудь о русском путешественнике и исследователе Востока Николае Рерихе? И слышал ли он когда-нибудь о учении Агни-йога? И если слышал, то что он думает про это учение? Спасибо большое.
So this question is about Rorik. So His Holiness doesn't remember if he has seen, and there is a museum nearby Kulu, where his paintings are displayed.
И в свое время я знаю, что он жил в Кулу, то есть в долине Манали, возле Кулу, и я посещал его резиденцию, там было очень много разных картин. И относительно Агни-йоги, то есть о том учении, которое объяснял Рерих, я о нем ничего не знаю.
His Holiness doesn't have any idea about that.
Доброе утро, драгоценный наш учитель.
So good morning.
В текстах сказано, что пустота 5 скандх, по сути, есть пустота всех явлений. Пожалуйста, разъясните смысл этих слов. Спасибо.
No. Well, it's simultaneous. So basically this question was about emptiness. The text, such as Saharsutra says, talks about emptiness of 5 aggregates, and so the emptiness of 5 aggregates also is saying emptiness of the other phenomena. So basically we can categorize the 5 aggregates into the consciousness and non-consciousness parts, and so form is matter, and then feeling and so others, and feeling, discrimination, and consciousness are mental aspects. And then within the objects of knowledge, we also have those which are impermanent, those which are compounded phenomena that come through cosmic conditions, and then those which come, which do not arise from cosmic conditions, which are called permanent phenomena. And so we can talk about emptiness in relation to these two types of phenomena as well.
И в данном случае говорится о том, что они пусты по своей природе, и эти 5 сканх, они включают в себя только то, что является произведенным, то есть только то, что появляется из причин и следствий. И если же мы хотим, чтобы были включены все явления, то есть как произведенные, так и непроизведенные, то здесь говорится уже о пустотности 12 аятам, то есть 12 источников познания, и 18 дхату, или 18 элементов. И в эти категории 12 аятам и 18 элементов включается все познаваемое, которое тоже является пустым по своей природе.
다가는 민미 나오면 남의 짐이 류미 이미 senida sungshi zane kana nangi jeje chi jeje di sunundu dan duje ma je 탐절로 다 kon dude bchi 전시resha ene 다가는 신기 담바실지니 담바시디에 ene 뭐니 뭐 저르시 소용도 봐 제가 가다 풍금지지 남샤도 제디 폐지 좀더 공 폐지 직벌이 좀더 마시고 폐지 직벌이 자 되는 이미 인도산에 로빈잉 제베 뭐버즈 다가는 신기 파고 토미ing 제베 뭐버 군주 디디 나로 세워야래 되니는 뒤졌다고 그래.
So in the Heart Sutra we find mention of the statement, there is no eye, no ear, no nose, no body, no form, no sound, no order, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. So within this, the word phenomena here, of course, refers, also covers the non-compounded or uncompounded phenomena. And then when it says there's no I element and so forth, up to no consciousness element, it also covers the within these also it covers the the compounded phenomena. And then when we talk within the context of the Four Noble Truths, we have both the phenomena, the compounded and uncompounded phenomena as well. And so to know more detailed about the five aggregates and the compounded and uncompounded phenomena and so forth, it would be, if you can, you should study Master Vasubandhu's Abhidhamma Kosha Karika, the Treasury of Higher Knowledge, and then also Master Asanga's Compendium of Higher Knowledge, Abhidhamma Samuchaya as well.
There are 20 people from Ukraine for the first time, as well as other people for the first time. And yesterday, all of them decided to become Buddhists. Is it okay, or is it too fast decision?
Я переведу вопрос на русский язык. Вчера на учение Его Святейшества Далай Ламы прибыли 20 людей из Украины. Они прибыли на это учение в первый раз, как и многие, наверное, другие, кто находится здесь. И они приняли решение стать буддистами. Его Святейшество, как вы думаете, не является это несколько скороспелым или слишком быстрым решением.
I usually make distinction, culture and religion. So, in this case, Buddhist culture and Buddhist religion. So, religion, faith, including Buddhism, is mainly related with individual. Buddhist culture is related with community. So, whether you follow Buddha Dharma or not, entirely up to you. If you want, if you feel the Buddhist way of approach is more sort of effective, more convincing to you, then of course it is you are right. You can follow. And then, you see, no need some kind of ceremony. So one Lama, I think with some sort of peculiar head, and then some kind of, acceptance, become Buddhist. No need that. As soon as you feel the Buddha Dharma more suitable for you, then follow Buddhism. It automatically become Buddhist like that. And then meantime, I always telling the people from different country or different area, it is better to follow your own traditional belief, traditional culture, because you see it suits. Change faith or way of life sometimes is it create more confusion. So therefore it is safer to keep one's own tradition. However, among humanity, you see, like Western world, traditionally, mainly Judo-Christian sort of follower. But among them, you see, a number of people, you see, feel the Buddhist way of approach is more suitable, more effective. So I usually see telling in the West, better to keep your own basically Judo-Christian tradition. It is not easy to sort of convert to other one. But up to individual, if one individual really feel the new religion more suitable, or one of Eastern religion suitable, then okay. But then important is you must respect your traditional faith. It's very, very important.
Культура. Если мы веруем во что-то, например, в учение Будды, то это индивидуальное желание или индивидуальный подход каждого. Если мы подходим на уровне сообщества, то это подход к культуре. И поэтому следовать буддизму или не следовать учению Будды зависит от вас, то есть это ваше собственное желание, то есть зависит от вас самих. И если вы чувствуете, что буддийский подход является более подходящим для вас, более удобным для вас, то то есть это зависит от вас, это ваше собственное право. То есть нет никакой особенной церемонии, это не значит, что я должен одеть какую-то особенную шапку, особенный головной убор и провести какую-то особенную церемонию принятия в буддизм. И повторяю еще раз, если вы чувствуете, что буддийский подход нравится вам больше, что вы думаете, что он подходит вам больше, то это ваше право, вы можете стать буддистами. Но в то же время люди из разных стран, я думаю, что было бы лучше, если бы было бы очень хорошо, если люди из разных стран, из разных местностей следовали своей собственной традиционной вере, своей собственной традиционной культуре, которая больше всего подходит им. И очень часто смена веры создает еще больше запутанности. И поэтому я думаю, что было бы очень хорошо, если бы люди придерживались своей собственной традиции. На Западе большей частью люди традиционно являются последователями иудейской и христианской традиции, но некоторые люди чувствуют, что буддийский подход нравится им больше. И я думаю, что было бы хорошо, если бы люди следовали этим традициям, то есть традиционным конфессиям. И в то же время, если вы все-таки решили стать буддистами, очень важно, чтобы вы проявляли уважение и почитали ваши традиционные религиозные верования.
Thank you. Next question.
May I ask you? Его святейшество Далай Ламе хотела задать очень практический вопрос. Дело в том, что могилы наших предков, они хоронятся на буддийском кладбище, и мы не имеем возможности их навещать. И очень болит сердце, что наши кладбища буддийские, они разрушаются со временем. И не так, как вот русские кладбища, которые там в родительский день приходят люди, украшают как-то там, садят цветы. И очень печально, как это выглядит со стороны буддийской культуры, что вот эти наши кладбища все в таком плохом состоянии.
Tibetan tradition, much Pama and Tondu Sambala. Talents of Urusu looks at Chen Mende Sao, let us basic valve. In much number Sangepa Mambuji Mende could Dorchu, Rob Besa, Cemetery, Cemetery, those Dogomari, Angles of Dil Kasamachu, Rob Besa, Cemetery, Tatoshi, Chigomari, Care Shida Chigomaris, Anchors. kunzo urusu miri gidwa namba sanke pa minde urusu miri ta kunzo halam nima takpar chinchirwa ne to tapche tsamwa sechi minde tejik ninjibo shiwish sugidwa e nge dus nitsul del ta minde nga lo pampo shiwish chigidosa tanga zo namba sanke pa dus minde susu pami gi minde semetra madro bache care mache bachirwa kunzo urusu ro to namba nima tejik ta to shiwish chigidwa tadi namba sanke bi chigidwa chigi dus ton dus sina di nitsul
Culture and faith are two different things. So, number of Tibetan Muslim, their faith is Muslim, but their way of life very much in the spirit of Buddhist culture. So, I think those non-Buddhist countries, people, individual faith, follow Buddhism. But meantime, respect or carry your community's cultural heritage. So then, from the Buddhist viewpoint, while you are alive, your life should lead meaningful. After death, then of course, the body, that body is like a stone. Or because the Kadabe, she's had a jelly, a Pungutin, Satuna Shasari. This I shall start to check him. Number of Shevatini, Pungule, lost Chinsari. Number of Shevat, 10 and Tabe, Tadi, go Sut Chinsari. Any? So
after death, the body itself, of course, disintegrates into the different elements, and so there's nothing really that is left at the end. So when the Buddhists people who follow Buddhism do not go to the cemeteries, and they neglect the ancestral burial places. And we do not.
His Holiness speaks English, he doesn't get.
So as Buddhists, when people do not take care of their own the burial places, the cemeteries of their ancestors, and then, of course, we do not need to be sad about that, because all of us have come from our mothers, and so we can still think about helping the affection, when cultivating affection and love and so forth towards sentient beings, although we may not take care of the burial places, cemeteries and so forth.
Традиционной культуре, культурному наследию. И пока мы живы, нам необходимо сделать так, чтобы наша жизнь была наполнена смыслом, чтобы она была осмыслена. После того, как умираем, наше тело становится подобно камням, то есть наше тело становится подобным камням, и поэтому нет необходимости так сильно беспокоиться о нашем теле после того, как мы умерли. Во время смерти наше сознание покидает это тело, и остается только эта материальная оболочка. И наше «я», то есть наше «я», которое опиралось на эти сканхи, то есть опиралось на это физическое тело, покидает это тело, и остается лишь это материальное тело, подобное камням. И по этой причине я думаю, что если вы следуете какой-то культуре, в которой очень важно заботиться о могиле, о своих предках, о могиле умерших, то это необходимо делать. В остальном же я думаю, что нет необходимости беспокоиться об этом. У всех у нас, буддистов, есть мамы, у всех у нас есть отцы, в особенности у нас есть наши благие друзья, благие наставники, то есть наши учителя. И после того, как они умерли, я думаю, что самым важным является следование тому, чему они нас наставляли. То есть жить так, как они надеялись, что мы будем жить. И я думаю, что это очень важно. В остальном же беспокойство о теле после того, как произошла смерть, не столь важно.
In this country, the Hindus usually use the dead body burnt. But one organization near Nagpur, now I can't remember the name, they established by Baba Amde, wonderful. He practiced a certain new way. The dead body was the clean, cloth, you see the kasa. Then it's a body. One instead of burning, one tree planted. I think that's and then you see his reason. The body in any way rotten, disintegrate. So instead of put in a box, just put in the earth, then eventually disintegrated. But as a sort of memory, because of the transfer, as a memory, one tree planted. So the family member, you can visit that area and put some water with the tree. That's, I think, very good. If more people do that, I think even ecology viewpoint also, I think, quite practically certain sort of contribution, I think. Isn't it?
И в этой стране большинство людей следует культуре хиндуизма. И в соответствии с этой культурой возле Нагпура есть одна организация, которая была создана Бабой Анде, и он совершает следующее, то есть тело умершего человека вместо того, чтобы кремировать, заворачивается в чистую ткань, и затем тело хоронят, а на могиле сажают дерево. И он объясняет, что он думает, что он объясняет причину для этого, то есть для такого поступка следующим образом. Он говорит, что вместо того, чтобы положить тело в деревянный ящик, лучше, если это тело будет захоронено и на его могиле будет посажено дерево. Так как тело все равно разложится в земле, но если посадить на этой могиле дерево, то родственники смогут приходить, в память о умершем можно посадить дерево так, чтобы родственники могли приходить, помнить о своем любимом человеке, поливать, заботиться об этом дереве. И я думаю, что это очень практичный подход, который принесет пользу экологии, и каждый человек таким образом может сделать свой вклад в сохранение экологии.
One Tibetan Lama. Now, one Tibetan Lama, when I was young, he's still alive, wonderful Lama, great scholar, great practitioner. At the time of his death, he advised his follower. He do not want, usually Tibetan is some high Lama. After death, they usually burn, and then some ash, they put some stupa or something like that. So he advised, no, I do not want that kind of practice. This body, even if a few vultured, feed them, at least it is some purpose, some help. So he advised, usually people, their body, offer to vulture. So he preferred that, and he advised to his follower or student. So burnt, just a burn. More smell, nothing. And then the body offer to vulture at least a few vulture, vulture, a few vulture, get some sort of festival. And then we have the Tibetan usually have some sort of particular sort of technique. They sort of brain, crash and put some samba, and then that mixed with the flesh, internal organ, then offer. So I think good festival for vulture. I think in Russia, put some vodka, then maybe very good. Vulture, then a little bit sort of drunk.
И в свое молод он был жив, и я знал его в то время. И он был очень великим практиком, он был очень великим ученым, и он говорил своим ученикам, то есть в Тибете есть такая традиция, что после смерти высокого ламы, высокого учителя, его тело кремируют, и пепел, остающийся после кремации, заключают в ступу, то есть заключают в буддийскую чайтю. И этот учитель попросил своих учеников, своих последователей, чтобы они не следовали этой обычной принятой практике, а вместо того, чтобы сжечь его, то есть кремировать его тело как высокого ламы, они поднесли его тело грифом, что практикуется для простых людей. И он наставлял их таким образом, говоря, что если вы поднесете мое тело грифом, то мы сможем, то есть я смогу устроить с помощью своего тела пиршество или праздник для нескольких птиц. Если же вы кремируете мое тело, то оно сгорит и от него ничего не останется. И поэтому лучше, если вы поднесете мое бренное тело птицам и устроите для них такой праздник. И в Тибете есть такая традиция, то есть есть такая технология захоронения или технология поднесения тела птицам, то есть череп человека раскалывается, его мозг смешивается с жареной ячменной мукой, которую по-тибетски называют цампа, и также внутренности также смешиваются с этой жареной ячменной мукой, и затем это все подносится грифом, которые съедают внутренности и мозг. И я думаю, что это хорошая традиция, когда устраивается такое празднование или пиршество для птиц. В России же можно было, наверное, смешать мозг и внутренности с водкой, так чтобы устроить веселье птицам.
Next question.
Күнтә бакшаник сургур бәнен анды. Орсагар сурчкнау. Орсагар. Я вот хотел спросить, Будда учит нас терпению, заботе, любви о всех людях, да, обо всем обществе. И каждый день сталкиваемся мы с такой трудностью, то что существует, да, каждый день, вот каждый сидящий здесь в зале сталкивается с людьми, которые несправедливо относятся или к нам, или же к обществу. Вот. И хотел бы спросить, также многие понимают то, что со временем порой, да, если бы те люди, которые вот несправедливо к нам относятся или к обществу, они воспринимают доброту за слабость, да, в дальнейшем мы понимаем то, что если бы мы раньше противодействовали этой несправедливости, то ради блага его же, ради блага общества было бы хорошо, да. И вот у меня вопрос в следующем. Где та грань между терпением, стойкостью, которую мы должны проявлять, и между противодействием несправедливости, которой мы можем противодействовать злу? И нужно ли вообще противодействовать, допустим, с благой мотивацией, допустим, насилие применить к человеку, который несправедливо относится к нам или к обществу? Спасибо.
They see patience as a weakness, most individuals. So how do we divide patience and perseverance?
Perseverance is 가서 어디?
Perseverance, the preserve 해야지.
가서 넣어 봐. 가서 넣어 봐. 서버 검사해야 돼. 제법 못해라. 땅선 맞으셔. 큰선 맞으셔. 제법 뒤 제배 자와디 아니 디펜을 그렇게 용기하면 디 심주전이 너바여도 보시면 너베런신지 차체 디 여베이나 자와들라 도린체 자와디 고급체 근데 인도잖아요 아니 세배냥에서야디 집 가서 우리 보게 가서 우리가 패스 소리 집 배shum되버지 짜니는 말로 세바서야 돼 뭐냐 단에 배 닝도 다 충겨야 돼 콩도 써야 돼 가다 띵데 소소리야 소소스 닝도 매베다 띵겨야 돼 세배냥에 제셔야 돼 생고 띵도 닝도 여베다 된 말이 다 세배 단다 엄마를 때 바로 보라 초심이야. 디 forgiveness 해야 돼. 디 forgiveness는 forget게 좀 말해. 큰진체 그들의 재정학습을 큰진디 간다 강사들 나도 치기도 와. 나도 남기 제법보다 자원이부디 떼세. 그 자원에 맞춰 윤세도 제대 제법으로 놓는 것도. 딘너를. 제법보디기 지시 그 자원에 맞춰 제배진데 그 냠바래디 아니면지 그 자와상 고 지글로. 저들이 이르잖아요. 제법보다 자와 이해하지 않지. 조직하지 모르시.
And so, as I said yesterday, what we need to do is make distinction between between anger and between the actor and the action. For example, when somebody does something out of anger, and what we need to do is we need to see that anger is something really negative, and because of anger, people do all kinds of things. But then, what we need to do also is see the person as the actor. So have no anger or hatred towards the actor, the person as such. But then, with regard to the action itself, the person is doing, the negative. If it's negative, then we need to counter that. We need to find countermeasures to stop the person from doing that negative action. And within that, then comes the practice of the tolerance or patience. So patience, when you have patience, when you are tolerant about the what is being done to you, and what you are actually tolerating is the person and not the action of the person as such. And therefore, when you are able to practice the patience, then there is forgiveness. And sometimes, usually what we do is we consider patience and tolerance or forgiving somebody as some kind of a weakness, but actually it is not our weakness. It is actually some kind of a self-confidence. There is self-confidence and courage within yourself to show, to practice forgiveness to the person, and while acknowledging that the action that the person is doing as being wrong. And so we need to make this we need to correct this mistake that we usually make. Usually what we do is we become angry at the person and not at the action. So it should be otherwise.
Any perpetuate restriction of Mambe in the time is an Dindrik Chade, was Mogochigo. In a teach Chabotella, the Mombe one. Any Jignanda. And then, or to the Mombe one that didn't you to ask some Zawakito. Zayachaso.
And so in the case of Tibet, for example, Tibetans suffer so much atrocities meted out on them by Chinese, while we actually see the atrocities being meted out on Tibetans as being negative. When we oppose that, but while we oppose this negative action the Chinese perpetrators actually made out on the Tibetans, we nevertheless keep compassion towards those perpetrators, because they are actually doing this action out of ignorance, of not understanding
Доброе утро всем.
reality.
Я бы хотела попросить Его Святейшество, если можно, вы мне могли перечислить 36 уровней сознания, если я не ошибаюсь, что их именно столько. Спасибо.
Could you please say what are the 36 levels of consciousness?
30 what? Susoju. Susoju. Oh, and the same Kadajik Sim Namsha Mumbe Takadamabo Kong Shumetic said that Chavina
The lady was asking
Takadamabo Convention Simjung of Zuzi Sungari Daniel Luri Dun those Sendra the Sunga. The Kiranga Sunju Soju said at the nation maso. I Kiranga Shanamashi Lava Yindro, Yamin Kung, Yamanda de Yo Yindro, Ding is a mission. Jiction did true Mendro Changjo Sudung Lam Yamni Chati, Changjo Sudun. That day, Tabashi to Samolog, Tumu Yamni Chari, Chambanya Shashi, Yanda Bonshi, Zudu Kambashi, Tazo Omonga, Donga, Shangjo Yana Dun, Palayana Get, 또 정적소도 있어야지. 그래도 이냠니 개천부지르셔.
So in Buddhist literature, we have the Abhidhamma text, and within the Abhidhamma text, there is this Abhidhamma Samuccaya by Master Asanga, in which there is mention of 51 different mental factors, and then there are other enumerations of mental factors in other texts as well. And in other words, we have the study of mind, and there is all kinds of explanations of the different states of mind, different mental factors, and so forth. But then with regard to this 36, number 36 levels or mental factors or whatever you are talking about, I don't really understand that. I don't have any idea about that. I don't understand what you're asking, but perhaps you got some wrong information from somebody who really didn't know well what they were talking. But then perhaps you may be referring to the 37 harmonies of enlightenment, such as the 4 mindfulness and the 4 exertions and so forth.
This one? No.
And so with regards to the mental factors, the 51 mental factors I refer to, we have the 5 omnipresent mental factors and 5 determining mental factors, and then 11 different virtuous mental factors, and then 6 primary negative emotions, and then 22 secondary negative emotions, and then 4 variable mental factors.
Второстепенных омрачающих эмоций, 4 ментальных фактора, которые трансформируются то есть изменяются, изменчивых, 4 изменчивых ментальных фактора. То есть вот это это 51 ментальный фактор.
Yeah. Now last 2 questions, one from here. Now last.
Теперь 2 последних вопроса, один с правой стороны и другой с левой стороны.
Его Святейшество Далай Лама, Сэмвана. Я хотел задать такой вопрос, как по вашему мнению, сегодняшние буддисты, живущие в современном мире, что для них самое сложное для принятия, возможно, или для понимания? На их пути, возможно, для их главного шага к свету, любви и просветлению.
On the path to enlightenment for the modern Buddhists?
I don't think there's much differences mental level at the time of Buddha and today. I don't think much differences. Then I think modern means external sort of buildings and facilities. These are big differences at Buddha's time and today. But human emotion is concerned same. So Buddha Dharma not concerned about environment, about building or external things. Buddha Dharma dealing with mind. So mind, emotion, these things are same. I think like all other sort of major tradition. Ancient tradition, but still relevant. So similarly, Buddhism also, you see, very, very ancient, but very relevant to today's world. Then difficulties means depend on individual. To someone, certain things seems very difficult to practice. To someone, easy to practice. So it depends. Kala said, Kawata Lawa said, Kansa so dedi.
И я думаю, что нет различий между людьми с точки зрения ментальных уровней, то есть уровней ума, то есть с точки зрения ума. То есть как в те времена, так и в нынешнее время, я думаю, что с точки зрения ума люди являются одинаковыми.
So when we talk about certain practices being more difficult or certain practices being more easier to do, and it actually depends on individuals. That's what His Holiness said in Tibetan.
Которые присутствуют между нынешним временем и временами Будды, заключается во внешнем, то есть в окружающих вещах. И буддизм же имеет дело главным образом с умом, главным образом с нашим сознанием, с нашими эмоциями. И я думаю, что все другие главные религиозные конфессии, то есть религиозные учения, похожи в этом отношении. То есть они являются очень древними, но в то же время они являются очень важными или жизненными для современности. И здесь я думаю, что трудным для каждого человека являются разные вещи. То есть разные люди имеют, для разных людей разные вещи являются трудными. То есть для кого-то что-то является трудным, для другого же это может быть легким. То, что для одного является легким, для другого может быть трудным для практики, то есть очень трудным для того, чтобы воплотить в практику. И поэтому это развлечение или соотношение, или отношение трудности и легкости индивидуально.
Пена, азу ломнире налия, эни ломнире ригаше, широкие родами дачеше. без lunzi che de shu che tung shu dong da lunzi che tung ya zhe be ge shang ya hu be de ba dan ya ri ka she zhu han le be da nam zhi chen bu ye de ba ya lunzi che sha kao de le gu do sa kor kor ji ri ben de dan dan men de ri ji le gang ye de ba ya ri ji le gang ye me de ba de le gu yong de do lan ne shi ro li ya shi ro chao shi ro sao 싫어 뉴 싫어 싸워 들어도 아니 리버 차샤네 쿠릭 주릭 아니 체베 싫어 쇠베 싫어 좀베 싫어 만다도 자자가 링가샬라 직하고 해도 야 링가샬라 야 라라고 해도 근데 용되기도
и например
So, for example, amongst students, because of their difference in their intellect, intelligence, and aptitude, some people are very good at memorizing. Some people are very good at memorizing texts, whereas they are not so good at debate, and vice versa. And then there is also difference in different. There are different kinds of wisdom or intelligence, such as what we call an extensive intellect, to know things extensively, or thing called brightness of intelligence, and then called clarity, and then also swiftness, and also profound wisdom or intelligence. And then there are also, when we use reasoning, logic, some people are very good at called comprehension of logic, and some others are good at the debate and arguments. And then also some people are good at writing, composition, debate, or teaching, and others are not. So it depends on individuals.
Это по сравнению с остальными вопросами очень недостойный Я просто по своему уровню осознания не могу понять, является ли он частью какого-то большего вопроса. Дело в том, что за последние полгода я трижды падал с велосипеда. Один раз меня сбила женщина на роликах, один раз автомобиль. Понимаете, со мной такого никогда не случалось. Я провел много недель в реанимации. У меня сломанные ребра, там сильное сотрясение мозга. Я пытаюсь понять, зачем мне это? Простите меня за этот вопрос.
I think firstly, I also want to share with you my own experience. I lost my freedom, my country. At the time, I lost my freedom. At the time, my age 16, I lost my freedom. Age 24, I lost my own country. So, as a young man, I think I never done nothing. I mean, nothing wrong. Right? Oh. But you see, difficult sort of, a lot of difficulties. My life, you see, past, through. My life, you see, went through many difficulties. Many experiences, difficult experiences, like that. So now, from the Buddhist viewpoint, you see, even within one life, there's certain experiences which we face later part of life due to early part of life. Due to certain actions or certain training of early part of life. It makes differences later part of life. That's the law of causality. Result, action, and result. So then we also, you see, have the view or concept, the consciousness must come from same nature. There's Pandacharagi. Namshi mimba, namshi ki nyele mimbi chiyan drups. Any phenomena which momentarily changing, there are two causes. One, substantial cause. One, cooperative cause. So the substantial cause must be same nature. So substance cause of consciousness must be same nature. That's consciousness. If we accept the beginning of consciousness, then we have to accept first consciousness come from different nature of substantial causes. So then difficult. So matters also, like our physical part, our physical sort of particle, also you see, come from same sort of substance. So today's our body, they go through millions of years ago, you see, the certain sort of particles, even during Big Bang, this continuation of substantial causes of this sort of body already there. Then Big Bang also, you see, there must be tremendous sort of energy which causing explosion, Big Bang. So there is particle already there. These particles also come from its own continuation of previous sort of previous sort of particles. Okay. Like that. So consciousness also, you see, go that way. Matter never produce consciousness. Consciousness also, you see, cannot never be substantial cause of matter. So that's a nature law, like that. So from that viewpoint, you see, not only Buddhism, but many Hindu traditions also, you see, accept rebirth, life after life. So therefore, the certain action which committed in previous life, sometimes it causes certain sort of experiences in this life. So I think in your case, firstly, if may I say so, I think you yourself maybe some vodka, so a little bit sort of because of daisy, daisy, so then drive a car. Possible. Sorry. Then these days, you see, many people, you see, they very fond. What's the that one? Oh, that one. You see, put. So while you're driving, you see some music or some sort of talks. So mind divided. Mind half go this side, half look road. So then, very, very sort of beautiful music, and then say 60%, 70% of mental energy go this side. So then, you see these sort of extent easily take place. So losing doing nala mangeba stoa, nala mangeba. See, the drive children, Migi Sheva is catchable. The Migi Sheva catchable shivjere, the Romunian, Naya Sheva, the Tikan, Shukchabu Chibaina, any Migi Sheva di Nangla, never dream to me, Nala Mangeba, Leuto. So the day that has you are listening. Church in it also leg. Nisutone, Yontik, Masak, that legend to the Yontik Yari. Tag again to the Rosami.
So His Holiness was saying in Tibetan that while driving, it's very important for us to use our eyesight very carefully, very well, and therefore. While you are driving, if you are listening to a music, a very interesting music, your mind goes to that more than paying attention to the road ahead of you. And therefore, in Buddhist study of mind, there is mention of some state of mind which is called Nangla Mange, which means there is an appearance of the object, but you're not able to ascertain it. And therefore, although you may be seeing the road with your eyes, but then your mind is more distracted to the music, and therefore you are not paying full attention to that, and therefore the road is not so, there is appearance, but then the mind is not called attentive to that, to the road, and therefore this kind of accidents can be possible to happen. And then, of course, on the one hand, there may be a karmic the role of karma in such accidents, and but then the immediate condition is your distracted mind, that you're when you are not fully attentive to the road, that may be causing this kind of accidents as well.
I want to know, because I want to, my own case, the gallbladder, about I think 3 years ago, gallbladder, you see, create a lot of trouble. So then finally remove. So condition, because of the physical condition, but real causes my own previous karma, like that.
И также я хотел сказать, что помимо всего прочего, 3 года назад у меня были пузырем, и я перенес операцию. во время которой мне его вырезали. То есть, и все это складывается из предыдущих причин, то есть из предыдущих действий, которые мы совершали прежде. И в буддизме говорится о том, что все, что возникает, должно возникать из причин. Более того, все должно возникать из соответствующих причин. И в Праманавартике говорится, что каким образом сознание может появиться из несоответствующих причин. То есть сознание появляется всегда из соответствующих причин. И мы говорим о двух видах причинах. То есть материальная причина или главная, или субстанционная причина. И вторая, второстепенная или сопутствующая причина. Так вот, все то, что появляется, должно главным образом появляться из соответствующей главной причины. И когда мы говорим, например, о сознании, то сознание обязательно должно возникнуть из своей собственной соответствующей причины. И причина этого сознания является бесконечной, потому что если бы мы приняли постулат о том, что сознание возникло из какого-то первого момента, то нам пришлось бы признать, что существует некая материальная причина, которая явилась причиной для нематериального сознания. Но такого быть не может, потому что материальные причины порождают только материю, нематериальные причины порождают только нематериальные результаты. И точно так же отстоит с материи. Например, наше собственное тело состоит из частиц, состоит из материи, и эти частицы или причины этих материй или этих материальных частиц существовали в течение миллиардов лет, вплоть до большого взрыва. И когда произошел этот большой взрыв, то есть во время этого взрыва произошел выброс огромного количества энергии. То есть этот взрыв тоже не мог произойти из чего-либо. И здесь мы снова вынуждены утверждать о том, что до происхождения этого большого взрыва существовала какая-то частица, из которой, собственно, этот взрыв и произошел. И таким образом мы говорим о том, что материя никогда не может произвести сознание, и наоборот, сознание никогда не может произвести материю. И это то, о чем мы говорим в буддизме. И в буддизме, как и в некоторых других религиях, например, во многих ответвлениях индуизма, мы принимаем перерождение, то есть рождение из рождения. И то, что мы испытываем в
which says that something which is non-consciousness cannot be a substantial cause of consciousness.
我的行程呢，前面都是有个所以你刚提出了你的有一些遇到了很多的困难。
Из-за этого случилась авария, прошу прощения за эти слова. И также очень часто случаются другие причины для такого рода происшествий. Например, люди очень часто, управляя автомобилем, слушают музыку. То есть они вставляют в свои уши наушники и слушают музыку. И будучи отвлеченными на эту музыку, то есть половина сознания направлена на тело, половина сознания направлена на дорогу, и это тоже может послужить причиной аварии. Если мы слушаем очень красивую, очень приятную музыку, то наше сознание еще более отвлечено на музыку, и, например, 60% нашего сознания, энергии нашего сознания направлена на музыку, и только меньшая часть на дорогу, и это тоже может послужить причиной аварии. Более того, в буддизме мы говорим об одном из видов сознания, который по-тибетски называется наламангепа, что можно перевести как неосознанное восприятие, когда мы видим или слышим что-то, но у нас не остается воспоминания об том, что мы видели. То есть это неосознанное восприятие, когда мы видим, но не осознаем, слышим, но не осознаем. И это тоже могло послужить причиной аварии или причиной этого происшествия. То есть когда сознание, наше зрительное сознание, когда мы отвлечены на что-то, то наше зрительное сознание очень часто воспринимает, но не определяет, то есть воспринимает, но не удерживает в уме какой-то объект. То есть когда мы слушаем, например, музыку, то многое из тех визуальных образов, которые мы видим, остается нами не воспринятыми. И таким образом это одна из причин. Ну и другой причиной, конечно же, может являться то, что мы сейчас испытываем результаты прежде накопленной кармы, то есть мы испытываем результаты наших собственных предыдущих действий.
Thank you. Thank you. meantime, I take a casoda, so she gang and shung the same shung de you are.
So in the meantime, because of having met with these problems, the misfortunes, don't feel depressed all the time.
Yeah, that. 가서 대사 되미 진을 참으시죠. 다지는 대대 다하게 심되는 렉송 레고를 송을 자 심수 뒤수 마도가 뒤수 망고 지시 자스 렉송 때 렉송 레고를 송을 자 자되기 참배 지금 랑도가 내디디 미지버 참배 송 렉송 샤르체 레버 송을 샤르체 시신기 차라 제베 터네 아니 고송 니주 마크버치야 다들이
И мы начинаем 70.
And so we are on verse number 18 on page 37, which says, this being so. So we have already covered verse number 17, which says, if they do not comprehend the secret of the mind, the paramount significance of the Dharma. And this being so, I shall hold and guard my mind well. Without the discipline of guarding the mind, what use are many other disciplines? So here the term holding or guarding the mind and guarding well have the significance of the reference, the two references to the showing mindfulness, using being mindful of what you are doing and what you should do and so forth. And then guarding it well means using introspection and then checking whether you are actually committing negative actions or not, and restraining.
So simply, so trares. To net the game, so tradores. Two simply, niens, just one. So the Tradinians, Chilo, to Jigo Remdoa, Tradinians are also some now. It was to us. Such in the Indu, Simpson, Tushu, Matova, Tushu, Jishas, so the sim, the Charachan. 다 조조 가서 쉬어야 돼. 묘목해야 되디 댄싱 차인 거 알아. 다들 좀더 공어 밑에 뭐 알아. 나 간다. 좀더 공어 여버 되디 좀된데 그 룽섬을 때네 좀더 공어 쳐 말이. 조조디 리베 잡아찬. 아니 지금 좀더 오모메 파 남샤지 송셔버들라 리베 제윤디 Rigved never poyundu, any tele chash was a turtle language. Yan tele te comortibe at the room in a jayundu. Yanko Rigved no Hindusane, any Rigved never member, Rigved Captain, the room Savas language. That idiot, some day, Lungkung, the Yache, or that in the Hindusane. 간다고 가서 한다 식수요인데 자 디디 또 삼류탄에 용거로다 남주탄에 조조 남주탄에 저도 타르도는 아니 저 심모도 자와 용의 자와디 댄질 투용이야래 디스머 자 다들이 가서 치질로 다 치질로 잠말에 간다 가서 우리 록시 직차디야래 그 진당이 탄예도야 봐 다 유리야 능유 송유 아니 가서 죽유 다 능유 송유 전직징스 죽유 참에 제된 신유 독배 것이세 그 정도가 다고 유면 담바다지 그 샤요도 그래서 이제 로이 차버라 지기 야치야 된다리야 아니 로리야 능유지 신유지 아니 죽유스도 패지 참에 유송면로 어딘지 전에 유면라도 다 가다니 안데 딘진스도 유르 temperance you temperance the temperance zilu ya semzabe ya songya da umobae nangse ya songda mena yong yore da zoang de shirin na la ani songme tame chimi rome risham songsha da kanda ngarang zo na tarke ani na nangsinge da suk rangmene da 주요 말이 세네 숨에 담에 팀에서 해야 정도가 저들이 믿으잖아요 다들 샤오링 못 따라 드리십니다 저들이 인도 간다 동네에 자와 댄식 제용이야래 다 데이터라 에네 지기 심 뭐지뭐야 몽구지디 랑진지기 지기 어디 서비스 다 뭐기 삼대류나라 개봐요래 삼대류다 데 세벨류 류 주보다 류 개반이 나로라 싫어서 서비스한테 시켜야래 저상가 드네디고 상당히인데 아니 가사쇼디 랑집은 좀 되게 랑집은 좀 진진되게 semmoji bosa da gyujin shukcheshi chagudo so dinri indita disungyari dinri da simsun dushuk sade da dijere gön tone di ko yishisle korba tönyeşle bezuç korba bezu yonla tönye korba tönye yonla yiji korba yiji yonla dumzen ton korba 와 사지 숨고 레슨을 라베이냐 대단 미투베 롱지 통용데 어떤 가이나 삼천 그러 다 리베 잡아chen 네버토데 비지메이나 다 대다 미투베 지 롱지 탐베이네 다디 공식 거가 가리인 로섬네요 더버가 깨라 더버chen 남상 데 롱리데 송샤세 남상 이치마 가다 미 류디 다치다 탄저 신 미류디 개치고 송야디 미 남주디 산제베 최냠는 제알라 철도 남식 싫어 쉬우지 개지 뭐래 철도 남식이 싫어디 미류된 디간다 투부 뭐 줘도와 산제의 인도 다 삼단으로 가셔도 산제의 인도 심송 뜻슈마도 뜻슈마 지시자 다들 송샤
и здесь
So the Buddha says that disciplined mind is undisciplined mind or unruly mind is a source of suffering and it is considered as one's enemy. And then disciplined and subdued mind is the source of happiness, and this is considered as our friend. And so our friends and enemies are not so much outside out there, but then within ourselves due to these undisciplined and disciplined
счастье. Таким образом, когда мы говорим о друзьях и врагах, это не только внешние друзья и враги, это и внутренние друзья и враги, то есть друзья и враги нашего собственного сознания, которые приносят нам пользу и приносят нам вред. И как я уже говорил вчера, основным источником омрачающих эмоций, которые возникают в нашем уме, в нашем сознании, является цепляние за истинное существование. И здесь существует некоторое разногласие между воззрениями философских, высших философских школ и низших философских школ. То есть здесь есть некоторое разногласие и в изложении этих философских воззрений есть несходство. И здесь нам необходимо исследовать, нам необходимо использовать свой интеллект для того, чтобы исследовать воззрения как низших, так и высших философских школ. И проводя такое исследование, анализируя эти воззрения, если мы видим, что постулаты какой-то философских школ не выносят аналитического, то есть не могут выдержать аналитического исследования, нам необходимо искать ответы на вопросы, и таким образом мы можем найти ответы в
Buddhism, and when their assertions and their theses are actually tested by reason and through reason by the higher philosophical schools, then new concepts also develop in them. And so in this way, we can change our concepts, our ideas from the wrong, what were wrong, to the right ones. And so new concepts can
за
develop
истинное
like that.
существование.
And so
И цепляние за
all
истинное существование является
the fact that
заблуждением,
our mind
является
is so
неправильным пониманием.
undisciplined is
И
mainly
оно
rooted
является
in this
неправильным с
grasping
точки
at
зрения
true
способа
existence
восприятия
in
своего
things. Now, when
собственного
we talk
объекта.
about
Когда мы
grasping
говорим
at
о
things,
способах
we
восприятия
are
своего
also talking
собственного
about
объекта,
different objects
здесь
here
бывает
that we perceive.
несколько
And so within the objects that we
различных способов
perceive, there are
восприятия, то есть
what are known as in Buddhist
восприятие по
psychology, we talk about
возникновении,
the object of appearance or the appearing object, and then object of apprehension or the apprehended object, and then the called the object on which our perception actually works or engages with. And then there is an object which is called the object of clinging or the conception. So this particular one has to do with our conceptual mind, whereas the engaging object of engagement or the object of our mental operation actually may be referring to some kind of object of the valid knowledge. In any case, because there is an appearance of things as if they have some kind of the objective true or independent existence, we cling on to that kind of true existence as well. But then, if we check carefully, things do not exist the way they appear to us. The appearance is that we have this appearance of a true, objective, independent existence of things, but this is not the case in reality. And so, of course, we'll come across these later in the 9th chapter. So, much of our unhappiness is due to our undisciplined mind. And so, undisciplined mind, as to this undisciplined mind, we have some things like self-cherishing, which is very much explained in great detail in the 8th chapter, chapter on concentration, on meditation. And so from this self-cherishing attitude, much of our flows ensue. And so what we need to do is, in order to overcome these negative emotions, we need to study about it. We need to learn what negative emotions do and how we perceive things to have some kind of objective independent existence out there, and it's not, but then that is not the way things exist. And so in order to be able to engage in the Dharma practices to overcome these negative emotions and mainly this grasping into existence and so forth, what we need is some kind of a skeptical mind, not just believe in the teachings, what is said in the literature, but then we need to be skeptical. And with that skepticism, then you would actually critically check whether there is actually reason and whether what is said in the scriptures have reason and logic to support it or not. And when you see there is a reason, then you become to develop conviction in it. Once you have developed a conviction in it, then you will actually want to engage in the practice. And then you actually would take up the practice. And so in this way, we need to use this human intelligence to the utmost in order to be able to make the maximum, draw maximum advantage of this human intelligence. And therefore it says, without the discipline of guarding the mind, what use are many other disciplines? And so verse number 19 says, just as I would be attentive and careful to a wound when I miss a bustling, uncontrolled crowd. So if you have some kind of an injury on your arm or somewhere on your body, which can be easily accessible to people and it can be touched, then you would be very careful not to be touched by others on that part of the body because it gives pain to you. So likewise, it says, so I would always guard the wound of my mind when dwelling among harmful beings. And so, and then verse number 20 and 21 says, should I behave in such a way as this, then whether among harmful people or even in the midst of women, the steady effort to control my mind will not decline. So this particular verse is reference to how monks should behave when they're amidst women. And it is usually said that in the tradition that the Shantideva actually taught this Bodhisattva Avatara during one of the bi-monthly confession ceremonies of the monastics, the monks, and therefore it is, of course, it refers to this line called teaches the monks not to be very careful and be mindful about their precepts and so forth. But we can also then we can also use the same line for women practitioners, nuns, for example, and use the same logic, saying that, or even in the midst of men, then whether among harmful people or even amidst men, the steady effort to control myself will not decline. And so this happens when you are able to guard your mind through by showing mindfulness, introspection, and therefore it is said in verse number 23, wishing, O you who wish to guard your mind, I beseech you with folded hands, always exert yourself to guard mindfulness and alertness. And then verse number 22 says, it is better to be without wealth, honor, body, or livelihood, and it is better to let other virtues deteriorate rather than ever to let the virtues of my mind decline. So this is talking about showing mindfulness and introspection and guarding your precepts. And then verse number 24 read, people who are disturbed by sickness have no strength to do anything useful. Likewise, those whose minds are disturbed by confusion have no strength to do anything wholesome.
Leno Gula Tumego, Tishin Mongbe Simdo, Leno Gula Tumedo. Shishi Mebe Simdembe, turn of some of Gombayan, Lotul Pumbe Shishin to Tabalana Temine. Turn then Tava, Jandani, Jumble Tumay, Shishi Mebe Gentle, doing all the Javajurus. That's a level Kadaka Sunkueva, charging a pig, Shigmana, and Mishu Tunjo Goswari, called Lava Castle Pig, Sushin to Sunkoda. 마시나 것도 안 되서 가가로. 자기네 일전에 미시고 동원 좀 고송하래. 아니 밤에 동원 좀 고송도 가. 시내야 야 밤에신 대변이나 야 그배 제제. 네가 중에 그도리야. 네못 때야 요구 말고 왔고. 자기네 인도 어디서 숨겨. 자기네 인도 제 태성 롬니 전에 지 가서 그게 작고가 근데 고숨지 줘봐 작고가 근데 참 미루고 근데 뭐 시기야나야 야 전배 쓰면 말이야 근데 시신 이게 그게 잘하셔야 뭐 주나 야 내먹고 연구를 송샤 로드 보면 주신도 잡아내면 때문에 되는데 진짜 시신 매배 충분다 잡아냐면 전에 손남다는 예사자 꿀류 초신 년종로 다 잠반냠나 시신이 말이지네. 나한테 인도 진짜로다 전신냠나 아니 왜
간다 묘모다 묘모 동원주 고소 있는데 묘모 콤치베 왕게 고 랑가 강게 용돼야지 어디니 뭐 있는데 천식이 년부초 천식 송투가 좀 뭐구나 아니 선언다는 예사님 군부 초보 신도 군부 초신 양존로스 묘모 총군 소원되니 러고 초월 쳐버디 라니 균네 개초하신 전주 소년 좀 그렇지 하나보다 땅에한테 되게 조조 되게 쉬운 시리 아니 덴지 그 뒤에다 그다음에 치든나 이야다 윤교 거한테베네 그 되니면 이거 그런 나이 것도 단들이야 우모버 아니 각자 tempo 왕실 민앙수매직 다 가다 타녀도 다 랑제 셰베 인도산에 아니 편에 조지 되니면 이것이 나야 네가 각자 능수 차대야 네 원부 셰벌 아니 능기 열수매직 다 각자디 로로 나온 거 샤보 모임 뭐 유런 거 투모 모임 둘루주면에 아니 주버디 각자를 샤 인도산에 공에 셔벌이야 가서다 뭐 미나스체니 소로도와 다 들은디 간다 가서다 뭐 와셔서 나왔어 그 인도산에 거다 간다 저기 난게 영화에 가이네 그 되는 건 여기서 나오도 다 텔레야 또 어시 그게 아테는 뭘 게 인도산에 니 찾아다 용도 저한테 인도산에 가다 어디 들으셔다 나는 게 줘야지 이제 묘모 충분 소원되니 러고 쳐 쳐버대 스코랑 안 가요 돼야지 대신도 라셔버 집에 진진 근데 민음 수제로 거 예로 다 걸어야지 현실버 집에 진진 또 코도 빼니 지금 집에 있나 아니 거 민음 수제로 하려야 지금 랑 진진 문주고 쇼트하고도 많이야지 고쳐줘야지 또 가다 라지지 용도 용도되는 랑 진진 샤와도 못 도와지기 다 그다 란진지게 상황시도다 되다 간다 란제는 좀 소소는 현대 차도서 양의 현여도 되지 그다 슈퍼 자줘야지 이걸로 어디 송샤 충분 묘문 충분 전에 러고 저어버디 라니 눈에 개토지 되는 소지 대외 잡아 이거는 그도 남양도 소나한 게 된다보다 잡을 쳐지 냐월 샤 어다 전시된 거리 소리
И далее здесь говорится.
So verse number 25 read, and then 26. So verse number 25 says, whatever has been learned, contemplated and meditated upon by those whose minds lack alertness, just like water in a leaking vase, it will not be retained in their memory. And so here, what is, and then verse number 26 says, even those who have much learning, faith, and willing perseverance will become defiled by a moral fall due to the mistake of lacking alertness. And so when you commit wrongdoings, going against your precepts and vows, and then what happens is this can happen because of your lack of understanding, so lack of knowledge. On the one hand, because you are ignorant about what you should not do and what you should do in regards to your own vows and precepts, you would go against the vows because of ignorance. And then there is also there are other factors which could cause such moral downfalls, such as recklessness is another cause, or it is called the door. Ignorance is one door to downfalls, and then another door to downfalls is the recklessness. So this can happen even while you know what you should keep regarding your precepts, but then because of your recklessness, not heeding the advice and the instructions, then you can actually go against your vows and precepts. So after having learned what you should keep, what kind of precepts and vows you should keep, still without your showing the mindfulness and introspection, you could cause yourself downfalls and moral downfalls. And then verse number 27 shows that when your mindfulness is weakened, then there is no ignorance, there is no introspection in your mind, checking whether you are actually going against your vows or not, you are doing something right or wrong, wrong or not, will not happen due to lack of mindfulness. And then verse number 28, as I says that, as I said before, what happens is we have this appearance. There is this appearance of true existence in things, whether out external or internal, or in front of you or back and behind you and on your sides and so forth. Everywhere you look, everywhere you think, wherever you are, when you think about things, internal, external, and so forth, there is always this appearance of true existence in things. And so with regard to this the appearance of true existence, called the true existence itself, of course, in the according to the Madhyamaka school of thought, the true existence is an object of negation that you should actually reject and understand that there is no such thing as true existence. And then within the Madhyamaka philosophical school, there are one subsect, which there is one subsect of Madhyamaka school which says that the true existence of things, an object of negation, is something that does not appear to our sensory perception. Because they say that something that exists should exist through two factors. One is there's the appearance of the thing, objective existence of the thing, and then there is also the valid perception of that thing, and together these two combined can give an identity to an existence, something being existent. And so therefore they say that there is no appearance of the true existence of to the the eyesight and the sensory perceptions. Whereas the Prasankika Madhyamakas, which Master Shantideva follows, according to this school of thought, now what happens is that this true existence actually appears to our sensory perceptions, such as our eye consciousness. And because of this appearance, what we do is we kind of confirm to ourselves that this is true, and then we kind of obsess with true existence in things, and then from there ensue our attachment and anger and so forth. And so the appearance of and the true existence in things is there in our perception, and because of that we tend easily to hold on to true existence. And so when we talk about overcoming the negative emotions, we have to actually go to that true existence and to try to uproot the grasping at true existence. And then when it comes to overcoming the unruly mind, we need to also cultivate cherishing others to overcome self-cherishing attitude. And then verse number 29.
Lama Gyöshini. Lama Tangni, Tangdiki Pager, any Cho, Jigda, Gewe Cho, Sandakanda Kuryuti, the Negi Pig, Mikdu Chesayuda. Kandata did the Kashamurisha. Shanda did the Sunsu Yore, Kanshi Sirki like Niajana. 대인 답자탐자 쓰도 주스 컨시 투르를 녀잖아 대인 답자탐자 도도 주사지 제나와다 디 송야들이 바나다 세지랑 지금 맨지를 준비이나 대인이 화도도 자대 있는 거 지금 맨기변나 치순 켜야 소로들이 요구리스 그러 바나 지금 매도 주마야고 여도 지금 여기는 디양도와 치성부터 켜되고 다시 증량바로 여도 지금 여기는 에나 디양이야 징에 맺혀되고 저상하다 되는 시간이 지금 소수 요새 서구디 지금 다 간다지 초 다주트마 지금 접어 상부여 딘레기다 초디 캐치물이 자 딘레인도 딕베 초부 샤와도 민족 거래시네 캐치 무슨 것도 계획 시샤디 계획다 간다지 초보 자식 시에지 계획 초보 송도 자 딘레인도 라마 랑도 내등에 라마 다가는 신경 줘 아니 따주트 뭐 진짜 거래시 다디 들이 최시기하기 치견이죠. 다들 난게다 겐디 도디 캠뷰 제수 때마다 다바도 제수 때마다 아니 지배 겐데 규절하서 다디 제 가다 사제베 최디 디르도 와 줍자 먼저 디기 더도 내리기 뛰기 니치 먼저 뛰기야 세치면 건도 센디건도 니치 내리리야 윤주자 방배 내리지 내리기 뛰기 아니 녀모 대샤가 바자 시류경 방배 아니 내리 더도 산지게다 고왕 뛰기시네 간다 다들 천리네 소지지 뛰기 두야기 다다지 레도가 다도서 상담도 되려도가 아주 대화병에 있다. 저들이 인도선다 대화 그게 가서 그게 이대 펼치다 대화 줘야지. 이 상담도 저상 먼저도 있어도 유에 동에 가서 유에 동에도 레디 이내다 내고 다 되고 야지 동에 문주 갈래 바다 가서 그래 자자로 매워져지 지금 되고 다 뒤유네 우리 얘기 줘야지 송도가 저한테 이거 인도잖아요 하는 거지 자들이 이거 인도 섬려야专나 예배타는데 산지배 쳐야 되지 직제 직배 견데 그지라서 직버서야 돼야 어디 디기 팬 지금 타로 토토야 돼 봐. 지금 탐지 준비 고봤어야지 다들 시준 뒤 때문에 좀 지금 상무스 코인이잖아요. 설리야 쫄난다. 이 숙성을래요도. 다 얘네 대투쇼 침배이나 딱 먼저 전에 답에 밀류탑에 거쳐 마서 삼아지 설리야 직나래야 되는 식으로 봐. 거다 직나 디스고 샤야 아무 별이야. 내 딱 봤을 때 되게 별이야. 얘네 캠부지 얘네 제갱 미실레버리 아니 캠부지에 미디어 용체 아니 캠부지하고 유스 아니 캠부 십지조인 거리 캠부시 더 캠부 슈메스 어느 캠부 가와태서 시키지리 아니 캠부 보모로 시나고 같이 소스 제가 다 드지테디야 그래서 또 접종소리로 책도 와 자다 산제베 취도 좀 된다기 동네도 뭐 숨어래 동네도 뭐 숨어래지 대슈구도 아니 고배도 뭐 숨어도 자 동네기 두 군중도 숨네 군중서야 탈도는 록시 덴진 록시 아니 시 규체는 용구야래 순두산에 록시지 인신자나 대인간다 치지 말라고 시베 로 참아지 그도 있네 여러분 이 소수 규를 깨마게 레마도 시 그도 있네 거 영향이 좋아 그 치지로로 록시 진배이나 대인간다 덤된지 그도 있네 여러분 저 랑기 규를 있네 록시지 여더버 대그 치지로도 떠된 걸로 지금 있잖아요 치지 말라고 인루 치신 시베 로지 그 그도 있네 그 깨셔오시라 자, 드레인도 그 치즈로 올라들 녀부담데 뒤 남자 체험도가. 다 녀부담데 게임하지 마도. 자, 드레인이 이르잖아요. 다 고배다 마신다 송샤고 다 네가 람. 자, 드레인도 녀부담데 제가 이르잖아요. 지성기 친 록도 록시 머리베 녀부지 예바인도 녀부디 마치바치 깨보 코네 코도 빼는 콤바이나 아니 스르지 여서 이르잖아요. 아니 동네가 자와증에 머리고 써야 돼, 새투야 돼, 빵투야 돼, 매버서 투야 돼, 지금 레인데 소리가 떠나려고. 저 산제베 쳐디 동해 송구야데 동해 겨울때 동해 딸도 방배 차와시 여대버 지겠어 인도자네 에네 다 동해 가서 올다 동해 지심 같이 쉬고 그래 다 동해제 동해 교회 동해 두직 동해 세수도 너는 머리비 샹와도 여배 겨와데 두직 동해 숨겨야래 코아서다 들성도 레닌디 머리비 왕기다 아니 레 두직이다 가다 사제 레사니 대왕기 주에 겨와들라 아니 코아서니 된제기다 풍부다가 레니 코에 민폐지 더요래 동네 코와 쟁 풍부시네现在送下来的话这里面就在呢到三到직제 사지 직부 된지团呢다 인중 개월을 마도 다지 아니 동의 장리야 직다 봐 가서 그래 직신하를 꾸지 용될 때 다지면도 된지 인도 직부에 견된 그 자라 전부 달라니 이렇게 다들이 인도산에 라마디 아니 간다 기계는 랍제 기계는 시작돼요. 랍제 루주기 신 야우지 영도 마요세야디 기계 비탈을 하려도. 자들이 인도 최년의 시작생에 뒤에 간다 아니 최 땡겐기다 라마 야우지 거야 돼 계시물이. 다 라마 그러지 버렸을나? 아니 도대쟁 나라 신인 투어 쇼 예쇼 연달하고 전제 lunguchu tinyi rodo dola makende zewe dangni gyawa bangba che juchi sungdo da norduna kezun sangsung ge yonde yosh ko are ada kundan bu songa shi ene 망도 타바 자실제 개 퇴전 지신 규를 자외 준 군자 단전 동동과 상 자다 송샤데 계속 상송 좀 봐지 되고도 너나 다 상부 연된다 주배 연된다 주배 연된다 자쇼 인도 개배 연된다 주배 연된 롱 키루 기 연된 이den지 과리스 다지 송도 자들이 메뉴잖아요 라마디 시작하셔 버려 그냥 아주 별이야 지금 라마스 지금 민유댕에 아니 지금 초보 중에 주나 라마 침물에 있어야 되지. 배 잡아잡자지는 아무 한다. 주주다 때문에 다부터 버리 뒤치기 때문에 다 버리 잡배를 좀 붙이. 잡배를 좀 붙이 배 잡아잡자지니. 배대도가 쇼대도. 저 저제 된다. 앞쪽으로 통대마다 개만이 다 라마식에 개를 쇼고 사이에 저도 라마식으로 쓰어야지. 내가 그것이 좀 좋고서. 다 좀 로지스코서. 뜻이야. 네. 대기시 긴든치스는 지어래. 개발 좀 잘해자. 남을 싫어야 올. 콩가 건주는 게 없어. 건주정로. 건주정로 남에 그들이야. dropad인데 대 건주적으로 여르스는 권이 로봇인데 대 용체 아니 그게 드시를 저래 그들은 로봇의 식사 대 알라지 lum는 기스 라마 제민두스 세 로스버스 그래서 가서 배배지서 달아야 지금 아니 지금 라마 지금 따라 찍지 따먹고 여기서 도수 연배는 오 라마 자시고 싶이겠어. 완전 전에 롱도기 연대 여댕에게 잡히르도 우치기 죽고는 팽인데 대 앞저 중에서 봐도 그게 매대서 와. 와도 진짜 나버려. 빈주주는 저한테 저처럼 쉬쉬하러 마다 나도 배배 라마나지 전에 예스데 라마체 디오데 창주체 니버체 산데 배지요 말이야. 고물로 찬조 열어 버려. 사실이 인도 가당 아주 라마세데 찬조 추지 말다. 아다 들께서 간나나다 낭배 최대층의 숙성부 예배 인도산에 그래도 라마 인생에 된지 개배 연대 매와 주배 연대 매등에 다 제가 용했는데 아니 가시니 김에 던들리는 용도인데 또 용도가 그래서 그 생각이 다다니제 나데 데미스투스 디스도 평상 진둘이야 아니 배별라마 주면 강대 요스디스도 세상에 드즈대디 아주다 장주 러시아 도알레디 용식다 직시부진도 도르체 모도디 진리게 비게다 가쇼레 라메츠니 상지 매체 엔직비 초보시 시대인데 또 소소적으로 사 젊으시고 소야를 배 개심으로 젊으시게 라메츠니 신이 된지 라메츠니 숨베거도 랑 모투어 셴 두에 내매베스 셴 두어 데베 라마테 토마르 랑기 규 두어시 거소스 랑기 규 두루테야 아니 주베 연den도 말에 가서다 그래 주보 긍중시 전에 똑베 연den도 민딱 뭐지 예베 미pen지스 대외때 뭐 찌다트비 규투루시 거소 대내 라버를 무슨 숨도 내베 두어로서 숨소 전에 한다 제 신이 두어서 니시오사 되게 간지데 뒤송도가 어디 된지샤 하여튼 인도 라마 친상 거야디샤 캐시모리 그래서 지금 아메리카 나도알레 라마 샴지중인데 중요하래 유럽 나도알레 영대기 아니 캐나나레 저 영대기 아니 자도 러시아도 알레 때데 영 시그리도 소소 저거 당시에 저거 그라 지금 남산벽에 달라마 인생이 여자로라 남산식다 태바체체 멤버체 당체체 아주 규칙적으로 론 준이 봐도 따스 라메 친이 창마창 지금 남산 마시나 로 멍구지기로 딱제체네 친이 창마창 딱제체 아니 우그리스 내 손도가 론 준이 봐도 따스 저들이 이미도 자네 아니 친이 창시다 땡과리 개침물이 다 대표게 그냥 친이상 지미 마신 것도 최저도 시를 사체 아니 저지는 체 대치기나 아니 야오용 그래 레마도 남상 라마체 지체네 야오야 말이 안다 디 공부한다 젤리 나서랑주 젤리 남다나 디송도가 공기 탐셨음이었어 아니 다지选呢什么选呀的几把아니 샤시야 직방 엔드네 샤미시야 탐스지 다지미시야 탐스지 데네 최시야네 부어 말아야 탐스지 고 탐스숨 샤도 샤르바 수체지 뭐나 전에 계정도 와 시 라마 최송네 제니 때 소소적으로 다디 당가 수미시 시고다 들이 다 라마단 저월에 신상 줘야 되지 다 신상 계시면 라마 천대지 그게 계시면 인도 좀 된데 이게 뒤에 내지 라마네 송지기 아니 도데 규디 디디 크도 지금 라메 연된 컨디션 그거 디디 14호시 송도가 꼭 계시면 인도 배너 라브드치면 기겐지 잡아 기겐 외슈디디 니라 창지 거로 디디 심주셨네 아니 기겐 고르마도 다가서 이제 시험 마시지 기겐 시험으로 딘나 신체네 아니 최대는 그 라마 계신 사디 천이 창지 최 주된시다 고야디 송래 참바자라니 루지스 다견 현시 상제 성주 사바도 구두 통면 시본데스 대다 군도 다네시 뭐 대다 탐제 장하나 딱월 다네 내소시 대자선네 모서다 직도 군데 디신너스 전에는 말한저네 상제 좀 된데 증리 방법 상제 좀 된데디 아니 나바터지 체베 이신가와 인스기야리 그래서 이제 이미도산에 아니 겨원 남기 꾸시더니 그 상제 남기 아니 토범맵에 시비에 거의 냈다 그 시야지로 이제 인도산에 말한저 아니 겨워서도 저번에 이제 장안의 유 사바체체 이니 있어 저래 됐은 거야. 그럼 대들었었냐 모사다 그든 진짜 디신네 대니 산지 제전바 될라 양다 양도 중 어디 소샤 강제 참바 이군의 수는 돈도 내게 제시 시신 원주신 소원다자 지원도 하다 뒤로 찍으세요.
And so with regard to the Dharma practice, Lama is considered very important in this case because it is usually said that if you are in the company of good people, virtuous people, then you will also acquire those qualities within yourself. And if you are in the company of bad people, then likewise you will acquire and pick up bad habits and bad manners and so forth. It is like, as we say in Tibetan, there's this saying where which goes. When something is in the vicinity in the vicinity of or in when something is near to place with gold, then the place that area also will acquire the quality of gold. And similarly, it is the case with medicinal plants. So then if there is if the place is nearby some poisonous plants, then the qualities of plant poison will also be acquired by that place, and so the place will also turn into poisonous place. And so this is quite true, because if you have flowers, for example, very fragrant flowers in your environment, then what happens is that flower will give good smell around around it. And then if you have a flower which smells very bad, then badly, then the environment also smells very bad. And so likewise, if you are accompanied by bad people, evil people, then you will acquire the evil habits and nature, the qualities. Therefore, it is always recommended that the practitioners of Dharma should not accompany or associate with bad company, but then you should associate with good company, people who are in good company with you. And therefore, when it comes to Dharma practice, the first important factor is the Lama, as this verse number 30 says. Through staying in company or in the company of spiritual masters, meaning spiritual masters or lamas, and through the instructions of abbots and through fear, mindfulness will easily be generated in fortunate people who practice with respect. And so, with regard to the goal that we seek, of course, our goal is happiness. Happiness is what we want to achieve. And within happiness, there is happiness of the higher rebirth, and then the lasting happiness of definite goodness. So within the higher rebirth, there is happiness within this life and happiness of the future lives. And within the second type of happiness, the lasting happiness, there is the total pacification or total freedom from happiness, which is a total freedom from all negative emotions within ourselves. And then the ultimate, the final happiness or the definite goodness is the attainment of Buddhahood. And so taken from this time onwards, what we are seeking is our happiness. And because the degrees of happiness may be different, and so from the very basic happiness, we should progress along the path to higher ones, and then. with regard to, the ultimate or the lasting happiness, of course, should be achieved on certain physical basis, life, physical, on the basis of a certain good life, and therefore we also seek higher rebirth as humans or gods and so forth, through which we can actually travel and journey along the path to reach our lasting goal of nirvana or omniscient state of Buddhahood as well. And so, therefore, this is about relying. So, therefore, we should rely on a spiritual master in order who shows us the path, and that we can follow. And then the term here, with regard to the word fear here, actually, what Buddhism is talking about is attaining the highest goal of enlightenment, Buddhahood, which is Buddhahood. But if we actually lack the effort, enthusiasm, and so forth to reach that goal, in this life, of course, if we do not put effort in order to achieve that goal in the end, then we would actually feel sad at the end that we have not made this human life a meaningful one. And therefore, if you actually cause yourself to not seize the opportunity now, then you will have this kind of tension or fear within yourself that you have actually not used this life meaningfully. And so this is a kind of fear that is the Shantideva, Master Shantideva is talking about. And Buddhism is not about actually causing fear, creating fear in people, inspiring fear in people, and in order for them to enter into the path. But I usually tell this story about an abbot in Kham in Tibet. One day, some people came to visit the abbot of the monastery, and the abbot actually was not there. So one of the attendants who was in the monastery said, "Abbot is not here." The abbot was not there, and so and then the people asked, "Where did the abbot go?" And the response was that from this young attendant of the monastery, the abbot, the response was that the abbot went to actually scare the elderly villagers. And so sometimes we kind of tend to be silly in our practice of the Buddha Dharma. We must not do that. Of course, the Buddha taught suffering. In the very first teaching of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths, the first thing that he mentioned is suffering. But the suffering was not so much to cause fear in us about suffering in order to inspire us to the path as such, but through fear. But then the Buddha taught suffering because he also has something else to teach us, which is the true cessation of suffering. And therefore, the true cessation of suffering, which must come through the ending of the causes, the origin of suffering, which is to say, by showing antidote to the negative factors which give rise to suffering, we can attain cessation. And therefore, because there is a way out of this suffering, the Buddha actually talked about suffering in the beginning and then said there's cessation also. And so Buddhism teaches suffering because Buddha has taught about suffering because there is a way out of it as well. And with regard to suffering, also there are three types of suffering, as we usually say. And then when the Buddha actually pointed out that this is suffering, and of these three different types of suffering, he was not so much focusing on the first and second type of suffering, which are suffering of suffering, the painful kind of experiences the way we also know as something unwanted, and also those experiences which appear to be blissful, pleasurable, but in the end they turn into suffering. So these two kind of sufferings, the suffering of suffering and changeable suffering, are not what Buddha focuses on. But then what he focuses on is the third type of suffering, which is the pervasive existential conditioning suffering, as it's called. And then this kind of suffering comes about through our karmas, which in turn are created due to our ignorance, due to negative emotions, and mainly our ignorance about the true nature of things, how things exist. And therefore, as long as you are in such an existence which is brought about through our karma, and then mainly the karma and delusions, and mainly the ignorance, I mean, we are bound to have suffering in samsara. Therefore, samsara is a product of this kind of conditioning of the karma and delusion. And therefore, this is the kind of suffering that the Buddha is talking about, the deeper kind of suffering, which doesn't appear to us, which we are not aware of as being suffering as such. And so we must fear this conditioned existence that we are in. And this kind of fear arises when you actually see that you are under the influence of, you are overpowered by karma and delusion. And this is something that you want to be out of. And therefore, you will have this kind of fear to fall in samsara over and over again. And so, so this kind of fear must arise through awareness of this third type of suffering, the conditioned existential pervasive suffering. And therefore, the Lama is necessary to show us the path to lead us out of this kind of suffering. And as Lama also is a teacher. And so students, of course, learn from their teachers. And even in secular schools, students are taught by their teachers. And whether a student's education is good or not depends on the teacher as well, how the teacher teaches, the knowledge of the teacher, experience, and so forth. And therefore, this called the spiritual teacher. Here we are talking about spiritual teacher mainly, and someone who shows us the path to enlightenment. And therefore, for such a teacher, there are certain criterias. And there are 10 main criteria that are mentioned in the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara by Master Maitreya, Lord Maitreya. And in short, we can talk about the different the three main characteristics of a teacher, the features of a teacher: being learned, being noble, and being humble. And so these three are very important qualities in a teacher. And so therefore, in one of the writings of Gongtang Tenpe Dreme, he has said that one becomes learned and through much learning, and one becomes tamed through by applying the teaching, integrated teaching within oneself, and one becomes a noble person through the practice of these and gaining the insight and realizations. And so you need these two qualities of learnedness and then also having the experience, accomplished one. And so the two later qualities of nobility and humility and can be together termed as the qualities that come through one's practice. Therefore, in Dharma practice, it's very essential to have lamas. Lama is very important. And in Tibet, usually people have this idea of lamas as being so holy, when they have many, when they are able to travel with caravans of horses and so forth, and when the lamas are able to appear very grand and so forth. But then people like people who are really very, very good practitioners, such as Dzabbe Rinpoche, and who in the recent times was like the master of the Chönjuk, the Bodhisattva way of life. And so he lived his life like just a simple traveler, a mendicant, and therefore people are not so much aware of his inner qualities, and therefore such people like him were not considered so much as lamas. But when people show up in a grand sort of costume and so forth, then ordinary people tend to regard them highly. This is quite wrong. And so one geisha in Tashikil had actually, I heard this story that there was one geisha in Tashikil whose name is Gyendun Gyatso, and he was giving some teaching. And then from another part of the Tibet, some nomads heard that there is some teaching being given by this geisha, and then by somebody. And then they came to the teaching. And when they arrived there where the geisha was teaching, they saw the person and then said, "Oh, some alak is teaching there." Alak is a Tibetan term for teacher or lama, and some alak is teaching here, not a great lama. And therefore they actually, after having come all the way to such a distance and from such a distant place, what they did was they saw the person who was giving the teaching, and then they found that the person was not somebody who is qualified teacher, or called a lama, as they would call. And then instead of listening to the teaching, they just returned to their own place. So sometimes we make the mistake of identifying the good teachers, not being able to identify the good teachers, qualified teachers, and we need not look for lamas whether they have grand residence, and then treasurers and so forth. For example, the 17 Nalanda masters, the Panditas, and such as Nagarjuna and so forth, didn't have any treasurers with them, and secretaries or treasurers and so forth that took care of their wealth. But and so we must be very careful in identifying the right kind of lamas and not get confused when people come to you and say, for example, in Russia, there may be people who come and who claim to be good teachers but not really good teachers, and so you should not get confused. And so I also heard some Chinese said to me that these days of course, there are Tibetans who go to China proper to give teachings to people claiming themselves to be very high teachers, lamas. But then in the end, what they are seeking is money. And then in the worst case scenario, they also seek women and sex. And so these are not really good qualified lamas. And one Chinese who came to see me told me that these days Chengdu is the Chinese city of Chengdu is full of fake lamas. And so this is also possible in Russia as well, in your country, and therefore be careful about the not falling prey to such fake lamas. And so with regard to the qualifications of a lama, Jetson Kappa has said that without taming, the whole practice of Dharma is to tame the mind, to discipline our mind, to control our emotions, and therefore Jetson Kappa has said said that without being able to tame your own mind, there's no way you can go on to tame others' mind. And the way to tame the mind also, he says, is not doing any partial kind of having partial understanding of the Dharma or partial kind of practice, but then the practice that accords with the general presentation or the general structure, the overall structure of the teaching of the Buddha, which means the three trainings: morality, concentration, and the training of wisdom. So we need to be very careful of the fake lamas, fake teachers. They are possible everywhere. They are in the United States, in Europe, and other places. And it's possible that you also in Russia have such people. And so when you want to seek a teacher, a Dharma teacher, you should not just jump to conclude that, oh, this is my teacher, without doing any kind of an examination of the person. So it's important to examine the person and then decide whether the person is really suitable for you to choose or to regard as your Lama or not, by knowing the qualities. And even in Tantra, it is said that one should check somebody for 12 years to see whether the person is qualified or not.
아니 공개다 가서 그게 로맨 소 아니 보도와 구지스무스 아니 제나다 아니 보도에 가서 또 시스무신다 반발이야 우샤제 안 도세니 다 배셔로제 슈야래 아니 기시 보도와 안 투샤 껴셔 땅에 라마다 샤르도 원네 근데 진짜 아다 진짜 시그리 난 진짜 막 론데베 울마 파제 안 론데베도 시제 아저 되게니 교 전화치고 가르도 쓰소리 보도 다 안다보도니 지금 그게 가서 그래 지 롱망아 슝 아니 쇼스티 인트라즈는 쇼야레스 다 라마 메두자네 엔다 디디 지 슝다마 드다 쇼스 다 카우토스 제니 다 술쇼이나스 두스 송르다 두스 슈르제는 좀데메 다 저래 라마 레범르치스 레범 따도치스 디송 다 땡거네 말한줄 페지디 강아자잖아요. 나 라마 니스라지. 나유 땀 망제 고보서 살래. 다 라마 다 조레범디 대체. 근주 된주 슝드스 그래서 도도 대체. 다 이제 라마는 지지. 다도 대대요. 저랑 결혼도 뜻이시네. 라마 세니 상지 내가 타고 싶어 줘도 Lama легом тяне ягри.
И у великого учителя Дромтомбы, когда он уходил, то есть...
So it's very important to have qualified lamas without...
легом тянче. Они яоджи шемшу이나. они лама 지 캔자르도 주무이나. они 아건시 라마를 약가다 당초그래. 이즈와야. 그래서 간달로면 셰제디 고야디 쉬우지 계시 버리셔. 저 라마 그주고 주시다디 로마 셰제 매비체. 대바로 저 이렇게. 네 셰제 매비잖아요. 애니 그주고 주시되고. 로마 셰제요나. 얘는 제도 말어.
You don't know.
So when Dom Temple was about to pass away,
로페지다 하람 정아스 친사래. 정이 신야래. 자나네 민 나고치 나 도와실래죠. 등사 자나나리야. 아니 라마든데 최지 개보 인생인데 용되기도. 아니 나고도 제가 대바사 시주잖아요. 간송수는 최지 개보 인생인데 고야디 김해고도 배샤고도 저사가 진짜치기도 땅에 아니 달라라면 직다 아니 즉 차요 말에 등진을 차요 말에 가지고 사 아마 자갈 때려래 나 자조시대 내가 그게 저도 말했어 다 조 처랑즈 라메 천이 근데 고기가 뒤지나서 로종치스 뒤셴바치스 아니 지금 저기 잡은 있어요 뉴스는 다들 천이 상황사 지나서 대체 다 디성다는 말도시 내가 가게 말씀이 어디 늘어도 가
요좀
디니샤 고송에 나 기시주의하래 공기도 배지치체 로마서 배지치다 즉 검자도 저 마시 치 때문에 아니 검주요 자도와 다야 야 벽이야 내용도 지금이야 라마 최신의 지금이야 라마 현다시 디기루도 제 디기루직 안다 라마한테다 지 최신 딱 상다 지 자금시 전조 송지 검 되고 주제하게 어느 라마디 라마디사 최쇼가 지금 용인 버리 아니 라마 현다지 로마틱이 드리스사 오 저런 그 라마디 아니 최년체 나도 검교로 주 베스타로 주세 내가 쉽지 되기도 매 라마 진짜 내가 되게 말이지 매 라마 아니 라마 키쇼스 묘 키쇼스 로마 사지가 살 내기 그랬었도 내가 싶지도 로마 사지가 살 때야지 라마라고 치는 것도 야 얘기를 찬서 깔래치는 되고 말했어 나 배샤 키쇼스 디스기사 되게 좋은 거 같아 제 디니 잘하나 코스디
요좀 том был ученик под
And so when Dumtempa was about to pass away, he actually put his head on Bodhisattva's lap. And Bodhisattva was a main disciple of Dumtempa. And as Dumtempa was laying on his lying on Bodhisattva's lap, then Bodhisattva thought about Dumtempa's kindness and so forth, and he became very sad, thinking that now my Lama is going to pass away soon. And he became sad and then shed tears. As he shed tears, the tear actually drops fell on Dumtempa's cheeks. And then Dumtempa looked up and said, "What happened?" And then Bodhisattva said, "So far I have relied on you as my teacher for receiving teachings and instructions, Dharma instructions and in transmissions and so forth. Now, after you pass away, who can I rely on? Who should I rely on?" And Dumtempa said, "You should rely on the scripture and consider the scripture as your teacher." And so this is actually something which is very, very good advice. And I have, of course, 20-something teachers from whom I have received different teachings. But as Dumtempa said, what we must also do is, until you are able to find a qualified Lama whom you can actually take him or her as your own personal teacher, then it is best to consider and regard that scripture as your Lama. And so when the disciples actually become knowledgeable, then the lamas cannot actually take advantage on you as well. And so otherwise there are all kinds of charlatans out there who claim to be teachers, but then they actually abuse their students. I mean, this is because of the lack of knowledge of the Dharma on the part of the students as well, and because they are not able to check the teacher whether the teacher is qualified or not. I mean, through knowledge of the qualifications, the criteria of teachers, they lack that skill to check the Lama. So about 20 years ago, one Chinese came to see me and told me that these days we have many Tibetans coming to China claiming themselves to be king of dharmas and kings of dharma, and what they actually in the end what they actually wanted was money and women. And so he asked me, "Can you do something about this?" And I told him that I cannot do anything from here. I'm in India, but what you can do is actually study the Dharma and learn what qualifications are necessary for somebody to be a qualified teacher of Dharma. And once you know these qualifications well and you're knowledgeable about it, then you should check these people who come to China proper, and whether they are to see whether they are qualified teachers or not. Otherwise, there's nothing that I can do from here, I told him. And then I have another story which I heard quite recently. I heard that there were two Chinese students of two different Tibetan teachers, and one of the Chinese disciples came to the teacher of the other Chinese disciple of a Tibetan teacher, and as she sat there, she found this teacher to be quite different from her own teacher. And so she said to her friend, who is the disciple of this second, this teacher, who is giving so much teaching and then letting the disciples to actually think what they have learned and then apply them in meditation and give them, this teacher gives them lots of homework to his teachers, to his students. And so this Chinese lady said, your teacher is quite different from my teacher, because my teacher has told me that, asked me to give money and that he will lead me to Buddhahood, which is not really the way it should be, actually. And so
Never send a daughter, many purpose dollars. Dower, yes, shadowny, Ragachos dollars. Gershi Milum, Nanjunum, then a woman leisure, Lamson Jigwa Dagwager, Yanda Yando, Chushita. Neso Kani, Chidane, Judicious dollars. Dunda, Jodu Dajan, and Romiana, Onja, the Tezanego Tanjo to Gavashan, Javajas. Lugin did the natural ship. Chow Donnes, Teneni. Goes to Ludi Shidawu, never in Shidawaja. Simply Langi, Nirvani, Churla, Sember, Gajenla, Shidra Tawa, Mishor, Tedder Bebe Kunjita. Jini Dingzi Zombani, Gaji Jina, Mishor, Dagi Yin the culture, Tedder Yilla, Sosota, Jigda Garden, Son Dever, Cademini Jidrisha. Did the Jimbe Tuda, Surim Daniel Shawarson. Kanshi something Charzamba, Teleshan to Missamdi. 대대바에 삼바에 디니르시 들어왔자. 대단하네 꾼릭체 현도 니거를 민주로. 시시만이 내년모 대단하네 패민주. 재미 때문에 나서다. 와서 때문 남아고 꾼은 죽을 뒤바나 대로 차고 빵하자. 되면 싸고 싸줘다. 아직 또 결혼 숨겨래. 겨져서다. 되면 싸고 싸줘다. 서린지소 제주나 대신 러버 전전에 짜고 대이 뭐로 돌. 강세 깨버는 데마 너주담 마원 더버 두나야 당부를 한게 셈다네 땜베 리버 담버샤 강시 릉이 착과다 초원 더버 대이세 레수 미자 마미자 신신소년 내버자 거다 가셔 잡아 개든 나게 장대 성주 와이 삼바다 개디 중진 루슨서 강시 단 다도 홀레바 샤라 메바 니타니 셰제 게다 잡아 줄바 제신신 내버자 년도 꾸디 장되베 요걸 전도 년도봐 다스름 점도 되죠나 제신신 내버자 샹도 야원도 봐 랑도 야원도 봐 마원도 심중나 제신신 내버자 미술레로 지바타 대신 지도 무조다 랑게 초신 심중나 제신신 내버자 대들 꾸는 요모다 되면 준비 이 땅내 제시 당보 대세볼 녀부이 되는 땀을 송을 자스 전에 와다 보우스 손에 지 샹을 떠봐봐 랑게 랑도기 에노 전시 땡 녀부 땡도 과리 사지 송을
is this
And so His Holiness has earlier read until verse number 33, and now His Holiness read from verse number 34 through to verse number 54. So 20 verses read. And verse number 46, here what is shown is that we need to first learn about the precepts, what we need to do, what are the things that we need to cultivate, and what are the things that we need to overcome and avoid doing regarding one's precepts and so forth, and through the application of mindfulness and introspection. And then verse number 34 through to 46. And 46 is mainly an advice for the gelongs, the bhikshus, to keep their precepts. And then verse number 54 says, verse number 54 says, having in this way examined their minds for disciplined conceptions and for thoughts that strive for meaningless things, the courageous bodhisattvas should hold their minds steady through the application of remedial forces. And so the term Pao, the hero or the courageous one, is used for someone, referring to someone who, through the having learned the practices and so forth, is able to actually show mindfulness and the introspection, to use them as antidotes to the negative emotions without having to actually rely on somebody else, but on his or her own. Is someone who is able to do that is termed as a courageous one, or a hero or heroine. And then I would like to continue with some points that His Holiness mentioned, which I've left. And so it's Rangdril. So His Holiness said that it's very important to have a qualified Lama, and one must check the Lamas. Without checking the Lama and deciding that somebody else and regarding somebody as one Lama is quite dangerous. And so Rangdril is a good example. And he says that according to his life story, it is said that he actually made 3 commitments. The first one is not mounting on horses and animals and beasts, and then the second one is taking to vegetarian meal, and then the third one is not taking any kind of remuneration for giving Dharma teachings. And so what we need to be cautious about is the business lamas, some business-minded people who claim to be lamas. I'm being quite frank, His Holiness said, and with you. And so with regard to the qualifications of lama, there are qualifications that are mentioned according to the Vinaya tradition, and then mainly the 10 criteria that are mentioned in the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. And then another factor for us is to actually be mindful that Buddhas and Bodhisattvas can see wherever we are. Their vision and their sight is not obstructed, and therefore we should avoid doing negative actions and be cautious. So, which is in relation to the verse number 31.
신도 녜다 다 디디 된데기다 가서 우리게 전시 때네 다 가다지 랑도르 제거야 디디 그 균제 시베거네 랑도르 제거를 마도 균제다 금들이 랑도르 디디 제베 랑라 켜카려 랑도르 텔라 마즈버 제제 도초 아니 가다 샹와를 치버이나 아니 경가려요. 또 디디셔. 최샤승에디 심근 낭네 당도랑데. 저거를 마도 현식이 까당제 시도야. 매봐. 생 까당네. 아니 왕면의 제배이나 뭐걸리 그러 봐. 최고가 전혀 연타면도 봐. 삼번 남다가 더네. 저거. 당도랑 저거다. 당도랑야지 영화래야. 거버준전 통네. 어다지 최부기니 랑라 캐도 삼바지 토야토네 에네 당돌은 그마도 에네 캐종 가려요데 마토나 엔데 심슈께 소소베 당에 군나라 자리 용말 맞죠. 근데 인도자네 신도 내당 써야 되기. 다 롬니체네. 지금 잡아체네. 간다 잡아체네. 지금 최부기 다 개변 가르가려요. 이 출신도 몰라나 종 가려요. 뒤뒤 잡아체. 근데 그 돈에 내가 때부터 없을 거 같아요. 신도 내당. 되네 대바. 다 대바디에 임벌이 겹시 세야지 매체. dunzen thongya ko ne ta thaba ji khore sanje be ta thaba ine da nyingji ine da 강이 있나야 싫어 그 저도 잡지 연구도 와. 그래서 드림이 있잖아요. 다 그게 로종체님 최로 남지 싫어고 터네 최부 최랑신 최부 다 개종들이야 오 상무권 있잖아요. 아니 뭐네 지금 생각 띵네 도마 있는 다음에 대봐. 다 그거쟁아 드시는데 직접 주습니다. 돈이 나와 니리야. 오늘 전에 다들 뭐나 전에 맨라시도 사바다 근데 지금 결혼하잖아다 뭐나 잔다 때도 집어지 용서를 샹래다 패바 랑을 패바 샹을 패바 안에 차도 되고 풀을 패바 용서를 사바지 셈네 아니 드리시기다 가서 우리 그 이지로 레이드잖아요 다음에 타발릭도 다 다음에 타바 디기 아니 다디 말한 게 줄이야 깨트로시다 저거선배 원득이 타바 레고도 다 다가는 신기 대대비 주 등경기 산지 좀 된대 아니 가서 저 다가는 신기네 변주주의 루를 약속을 드셔라 뭐냐 전에겠지 다 뒤에 송셔래 송 뒤들이야 저기 다 이질이야 근데 하고라도야 세제내 숨세네 통원근주 중세고주 신도고주 사실이 연구하래 통원근주 그거 말고 그 통대하래 안다 생리가 안다 안다 보도 생리는데 통원근주 조르샤 다 정상 신의 지 중세고주가 신의 직다 로데게도 가 자, 다 간다 제 중세고주 써야 돼. 다 리베 잡아chen 다 그지 자와다 갸와다 겐지 dinege tane da jawashare 자다 도이니 로빈 체락 다 세면중 나라라 지 그게 덴지 라 지금다 덴지 거야 뒤 다양다고 다 아니 텐주군상 다 뒤뒤 다 잡아치야가 라자 들이도 자지 뒤뒤 안다 덴지를 거다 지금다 뒤뒤 태주고 싶어 차려래 다 태주고 싶어 뒤야 뒤에 야 되베지 봐다 디디를 땡이요 디디를 쓰는 다 딘지기다 얘가 편준 때보다 편준 저여 디디가 더네 편준 저와든 겨와 딘지가 더네 고 저치기 있는잖아요 고다 뒤주고 싶어 디레고도 다 편준 찍찍 그게 때베 더네야 나빠 준줘야 아니 난 치제이네 고 제연유 더 초인잖아요 양고 넘겨 싸워를 치 난 셰발이네 심중기 셰발 담르지도 세네 그 차이르잖아요 야 셰병 모르고 양지 눈주하는데 용되기도 어디디 치자이네 난게 셰발 용이네다 야 디디 소소스 즉 체례로 매다마다 이들시도 다 디디 자치베서 보셔야 돼. 다 디디 용야데 다 춘이를 간다고 그래. 어다 도스네. 춘이를 때 당도 전리의 춘이를 보지 캐라야 되셔. 춘이를 보지. 되네 자치베서 보지 딱자치는 해야 되거다. 친구부 시샤를 마도 신지 그거 어디도 와. 춘이를 봐. 자치베서 봐. 되네. 뒤주고 봐. 다 디도네. 아니 태주부터 집에 최디리 딱 그래서 그 모습 딱새새 제가 전도 돼야지도 와. 자다 남외다리 댄지르고 디리 개우 쉬어져래. 다는 가정에 넣이 봐다. 배시 사업 한테다 먼저 söjeda 교통을 쌓다 지나로라. 아니 셰제 유기 남샤. 제지 로이 남샤. 제지 로이 yu sheni nyongjidan 아니 샤지르 샤자 다 하고 중세 고주를 뒤에 이 densi를 그 단에 컨디션다 다 제고요. 유지 개발을 되네. 지금 각다 좁다서로 아니 어디 뒤에 겐드리 단에 전에 뭐 레고도 뒤에 어디도마다 아주 대주만 써요라다. 저는 어디 도시네. 다 진짜 인도 내가 뒤에 쉐브체네. 잡아체네. 데이터는 애니스턴이야. 내가 토비르잖아요. 엔 타버리 기대하지 누가. 진짜기 싫어 잡대. 담보여대에 토네. 아니 타버리다 담보쇼 차로. 진짜 시주니 타버 대다. 다 진짜기 다 타버다 싫어. 송도 되는 여백도리야. 아니 담보다. 아니 담다 그다. 셔서제. 아니 뭐서 시신 직제당 시신 샹다. 샹가 체로 단 노전이 지금 장주고 섬니리야 다 매번 째지게 뒤냐면 차이도 있잖아요. 아니 지시 샹도도 요시다 용도야 뒤송이 말이. 다 진행이 펜션 미준 집에 너반나기 미주신 묘모 제변들다기 심지 중년 전대다 카나마도 맹어라 다들 심지 왕지시 주거신도 가면 인도 다도 송을 잡았어. 링실론의 대외초 토바 양단 양삼네 심지도부 르르다 르르도미로 송어차 전에 다 되게다 가서 쉬어도 남지겠다 쉬어 제바제 도센다 손을 뱅게 때부터 저지 요리 전에 엔다 진짜 영야디 말하면서 밀 토바 디기다 남주 때려서는 연구가 있는잖아요. 링식론의 대외 초스 아니 미루 대제 주주사다 대제 주주 뭐서 지도부 상대에게 유진진지 토바디 아니 야내양도 삼네스 심체도 르다 르도 미우스마차스 어디 손샤
И далее говорится, что с решимостью, верой и благоговением,
with regard to what practices are to be adopted and what are to be avoided or discarded, what we need to do is we need to actually develop a sense of understanding what these are and how to go about with these practices based on reason and logic. So, in order to be able to do these practices, what are to adopt some practices that are needed and to discard or avoid the others, we need to actually see the pros and cons of these things. We need to see what are the benefits of doing those practices which are to be adopted and what are the actually negative consequences of doing those that need to be avoided. And therefore, with such an attitude, then you can actually so in order when you are able to when you look for these the pros and cons of the practices, then you will be able to do them on reason based on reason and logic. And with regard to Dharma practice, of course, it needs to be done on a voluntary basis. Nobody can impose Dharma practice on you, and somebody cannot impose this practice on you. It needs to come voluntarily. The wish to practice Dharma must come voluntarily from your own side. And so by seeing the pros and cons, and you need to do that. And without being able to see the pros and cons, you will not have the interest to do the Dharma practices. So in order to develop interest in the Dharma practice, you need to see what are the negative consequences of doing things which are to be avoided and what are the negative consequences of not doing the practices that need to be done and so forth. And so one needs to do the Dharma practice on a voluntary basis, and therefore you need to use your critical faculty to see the pros and cons and then decide for yourself based on reason reason to do the practices.
Затем мы должны правильно
And therefore, in verse number 55, it says, being very resolute and faithful. And so resoluteness here has to come through your own decision that comes based on your reason and seeing the reason to do the practices and what need to be avoided as well, avoiding them. And also seeing the long-term and short-term consequences of the practices as well. And so once you develop this interest, the understanding to reason, then you will have faith in the practices. And therefore, there is this admiration for the practices that are taught in the Dharma. And here, with regard to this kind of faith, I would like to relate to the practice of bodhicitta and the understanding of the view of emptiness. So when I think about bodhicitta, this altruistic intention, and also the understanding of emptiness, I find these two principles to be very, very helpful to me and to others as well. And then I can also see the long-term and short-term benefits of these two experiences and these two principles. And therefore, you develop this kind of faith and admiration or by seeing the qualities or the benefit of these experiences. And then having understood this benefit and the consequences of the positive consequences of these practices, then what I can develop is this wish to actually do these practices, develop bodhicitta within myself, and also develop the view of or the understanding of emptiness within myself. And therefore, there is this faith, which is the aspiration to actually integrate these principles within myself. And therefore, this is something that is done, that has been done in the past, like masters like Nagarjuna and so forth have done this. And then within this context, we also need to understand the three different objects of knowledge. Three different objects of knowledge means that the first one is the obvious phenomena, things which are obvious to us, that we can see with our senses, eyes, sight, hearing, and so forth, and which even science actually is focused on. And then this science mainly is, of course, focused on what is obvious and called more on the material aspect. And then there is another set of phenomena which are in the Buddhist epistemological text is called slightly obscure or hidden phenomena. Now, in order to come to the conclusion, to understand or to really understand or gain insight into this, what we need to do is do lots of analysis. So analysis is done on the basis of seeing relations between things, how things are related to each other, and how they also contradict each other, oppose each other, and so opposite contradiction, called the law of contradiction and law of relations. Understanding these, then we do the different analysis into things and come to the conclusions through inference. And so these inferences come through logic and called reasoning based on the principle of contradiction and principle of relations. And Dharmakirti's texts are full of these kind of logics. And also there is in Dharmakirti's text on logic and epistemology, we find all kinds of logics or reasoning and also reductio ad absurdum kind of logic, and is also there. And so these are used as instruments for us to analyze into the reality of things. And therefore, there is this the principle on the basis of this, using these reasonings and so forth to find the reality. We use this principle, these four principles now. The first one is the principle of evidence or using arguments. And so So in order to use arguments, as I said earlier, in order to be able to use arguments and do analysis and call it check, examine things, we also need to see the relationship between things, contradictions and relationships between things. Therefore, this principle is dependent on the principle of relation or relativity or dependence. So when we look at things, we can see how things arise through causes and conditions. In the external world, we can see this, how things changing, new things coming up, and because of certain new conditions and causes, giving rise to them. And then also in the internal world of our mind, we also see changes going on in our experiences because of meeting with all kinds of conditions. And therefore, we have the principle of efficacy of things. So there's efficacy or the functionality of things, and which means that things have their own way of behaving, their own nature, their own functions and efficacy. And therefore, these efficacy of the functions of things are in turn nature. And so there is the third, the principle of efficacy or functionality, and this relates in modern science, of course, this relates mainly to matter, material things, whereas in Buddhism we also include within this the function of mind, mental factors, and so forth. And so, how things function and so forth is nature. And therefore, as I mentioned yesterday, we have already compiled the book on Buddhist science, the compendium of Kanjur and Tenjur, which compiled. And so within this we have different topics such as objects of knowledge, what are the objects that are to be known or learned, and then the subjective mind or consciousness, which actually perceives and cognizes things, and then through the interaction between the subjective mind and the objects of knowledge, what kind of experiences develop in us. And then also there is this book also goes through the relations and so forth of things. And so in this way we have these, and so we need to develop wisdom through firm wisdom that's to be developed. We can also develop
Дорогие друзья, сейчас, когда его святейшество покинет этот зал, вы отправитесь.
Whatever you do in terms of practice of bodhicitta and the way of emptiness, everything comes through everything. Whatever you do is for the benefit of others. So His Holiness read through the verse number 58.